Hi, everyone. My name is Robin Walsh. I'm part of the Bart Ehrman team. I'm a scholar of New Testament and early Christianity. And today's topic is, what do our bodies look like in the afterlife? I think there are a variety of ways to answer this that have to do with what is going on in the first century versus what goes on in later centuries, particularly once the church fathers get a hold of this topic. And I'm thinking about people too, like Augustine. And I can recommend a scholar right off the bat that I think has an excellent book on this. His name is Taylor Petrey, and he has a book called Resurrecting Parts. So if you haven't checked his book out, I would definitely give it a look, as well as his other scholarship, and he's a great scholar. But let me go to Paul. And I actually just had an article come out about this, which is why it's on my mind. And in that article, I was talking about how Paul seems to think, along with other Greek and Roman philosophers and people who consider themselves essentially like scientists in antiquity. Remember, there weren't disciplines in the same way that we have now. There wasn't like the humanities and STEM. If you were an educated, elite, culturally elite individual, you probably dabbled in a variety of different pursuits, including things like philosophy, but also science. And so we have a lot of ancient philosophers who are trying to consider something like, what is the moon? What's going on with the cosmos? And there was an understanding of what we might call heaven and an afterlife that could exist in the cosmos. I mean, after all, down from sailors to farmers, it really mattered what was going on in terms of cycles of the seasons, but also what was going on in terms of navigation and so forth with the cosmos. There were also people involved in religious activities who used the cosmos and things like horoscopes and even things like a discussion on what the moon is to try to establish their authority. One thing we see philosophers do is say that the moon must be some kind of almost like a bus stop on the way to the afterlife, that it's almost like a clearinghouse for souls. And so they imagine that after death, souls would probably start to rise up because they're made of a more ethereal stuff, kind of like different levels of the atmosphere, and they would probably rocket up to space. And maybe the moon is the first place that you stop to figure out, where is your soul going to go? On to Elysium? On to dance along the Milky Way? Or are you going to end up kind of being stuck in some kind of liminal state? I think Paul reflects a lot of the same kind of thinking, including when he talks about different levels to heaven. He talks at one point about a third heaven, and it's a little bit unclear what he means by that. I think scholars have sort of been bewildered by this to some extent, unless you think about these different layers to the cosmos and the different significance of things like the moon in ancient imagination. Now, this is kind of a strange thing to talk about, and again, I was supposed to talk about what our bodies are supposed to look like, but in the course of that conversation, and I'm thinking here about something like 1 Corinthians 15, where Paul talks about different kinds of bodies. He actually uses a word often that means something more like flesh, like an actual material stuff of the body. He talks about how there's a different kind of body for fish and a different kind of body for human beings and birds. I think he includes birds, but he also says of essentially the planets, of the cosmos, of the stars too. And he aspires for us to be more like this ethereal stuff. In the course of that conversation, he does make it sound like Jesus is a little bit David Bowie. He calls Jesus at various points, he's up in heaven waiting to come back down. He's like a starry man. He's up there, marshaling a heavenly army that's going to come and bring God's kingdom, to bring heaven on earth. And he talks about how we're going to look like that starry man. We're going to be imprinted in a similar way. Does that mean we're all supposed to look like Jesus in the afterlife? I'm not quite sure, but I think we're supposed to have some kind of idealized form of our own physical selves. I think there's a metaphor that you see, or an analogy that people make to the idea of a wax seal in antiquity. So you'll look like you, but you'll be a better version of you. And certainly the germ of that idea is something that we still think about today, or we still think in terms of today when we think about an afterlife. If you're curious about this, I could certainly say a lot more. Please check out my article if you have access to it, or check out a preview on academia.edu. But also you can contact me, or we can hold more discussions through bartehrman.com/BSA Learning. I actually did give a whole lecture about this for the last New Insights into the New Testament series that was held in the fall. So there is a lecture on this available, about an hour-long lecture. Also happy to take comments and questions within the discussion boards at BSA Learning. So check it out, bartehrman.com/BSA Learning. And looking forward to your comments on this one. but hope you check it out. Thanks. Bye.